November 3rd can't come soon enough. We're all very excited to see if Team Red is going to be able to give us something to compete with the RTX 4090, whether in performance or price or both, but here's some pictures of it. Well, at least this is probably an engineering sample that's been sent out, and this is making the rounds. So while this doesn't give us a huge amount of new information about the card, we do get a look at it, and this is looking at it up against, I believe, a 6900 XT for size comparison. And the new cooler model, you can kind of see the design. I think it looks nice. It is a little bit longer, so these are definitely getting bigger. But one thing I like to see on this, in the, all the talks about, first of all, pin connections. I mean, we already knew that AMD confirmed that they are not going to be going with that new 12-volt power thing that we'll talk more about those issues later. You guys are probably sick of hearing about it at this point anyway, but the point is, two 8-pin connectors. Now, this is the reference model, so I'm sure that there could be some AIB partner cards that end up going with 3 pins or more, and it's also unclear if this is the top-end 7900 XTX, if that naming scheme ends up being true, more on that in a second, or if this is just the 7900 XT version. But it is only two 8-pin power connectors, which is actually nice to see if we're worried that there's going to be like ridiculous power consumption on these GPUs. If it can be fed by two 8-pin power connectors, then I believe that should limit it to 375 watts because you can get 150 from each of these 8-pin connectors, and I think 75 watts from the motherboard connection on the PCIe slot. So interesting. I think it looks cool. We got these red lines and things like that. I think that's just kind of indicating this is an engineering sample, that kind of thing. Now, that's not giving us any particular like I said, new stats or anything, but like I said, we do get a look at the power connectors, which is good to see. And as always, with pictures like this, you've got to say, grain of salt and whatnot. It's not official from AMD, but that looks like somebody does have one of the engineering sample boards. Let's see, this is another article on the same thing. I don't think there's anything particularly different in that one. Regarding the naming scheme of the 7900 XT versus XTX, we are getting apparently Chili Dog, who I don't actually remember sharing information, but according to this Video Cards article, is saying has shared confidential information before. So I can't personally confirm the track record here, but seems to be some blocked out naming schemes, but showing the XT version and 20 and the XTX version with 24. So that seems to be once again confirming the XT and the XTX, with a 20 gigabyte model and a 24 gigabyte model. So that's, again, not really new information, but Chili Dog here seems to be confirming the rumors we'd already been seeing. And again, here's some of the rumored stats, not official yet. November 3rd, guys. I'll bring you anything early if we get it, but we're already pretty close to November 3rd. It feels like AMD's been a lot quieter on the leaks front when it comes to actual performance numbers than what we were seeing leading up to the Nvidia launch. Not that that means anything about its performance, it's just something I noticed. Anyway, speaking of competing with the 4090, it looks like Galax or probably Galax or Galaxy, I don't know, man. Anyway, these new images are being shared by Black Dot at Black Dot on Twitter, and I'm seeing it here on videocards.com. All my sources are always in the description to the video. We're seeing a 4090 with two of those 12-volt power connectors. Now remember, each of those is rated at 600 watts. So this is clearly a board designed for absolutely extreme overclocking. This is, I think it even has a BIOS switch specifically to go to LN2 modes, that kind of a thing. So this is definitely designed around chasing world records, not for, normal use with two of those. Although, hey, would having two of those reduce the load on each of them and, maybe they don't catch on fire? Well, speaking of that, so this is the WCCF Tech article rounding it up, but really this is referencing that Gamers Nexus did a whole bunch of testing and followed up on the Igor's lab, as well as some other, theories out there on the internet on why these things are burning up. And, you know, it looked like Gamers Nexus well, he was very careful to say he didn't disagree with Igor's analysis, but that Igor's power connectors on his pin seemed to be constructed differently than the 5 that he had at Gamers Nexus. So one of them seems to have cords, you know, these little cables rated at 300 volts. And is it volts? Isn't that watts? Well, anyway, whatever. I'm not, like I said, I don't understand electricity all that well. But the point is, the construction seemed a lot better on the ones that he had at Gamers Nexus, and he was not able to replicate any of those failures. But I guess it is the volts, yeah. So these are rated at 300 volts on his connectors, and the one that Igor's lab had said 150 volts. So there clearly seems to be some of these worse than others, but it's completely unclear how widespread that is, or if the ones that we're seeing failing, you know, posted on Reddit and all that, are lining up with this 150 volt cord and this other type of construction. So do take a look at the Gamers Nexus video. He encourages you to you know, take a look at your actual cords. I haven't unpeeled mine yet to see what kind of one is in there. And he's also offering to buy cords that are failing, or even the whole GPU. So definitely worth looking into, you know, if you're interested in all that, or you have a 4090 and you're worried about it, that type of thing. Now, speaking of, you know, NVIDIA GPUs, the RTX 3060 Ti, we've seen the GDDR6X version, you know, memory upgraded out here. Well, Asus has a new dual version, so that's their dual cooler. That's one of their cooler models, and they now have one based on the GDDR6X memory. And you can see the clock speeds and all that right here. So those are getting out there in the wild, and, you know, they are a real thing. Now, speaking of other NVIDIA GPUs, the 4080, we have seen some listings at MSRP in the United States. You know, obviously not in stock yet. I believe these are supposed to launch on the 16th of November. But we are at least seeing some listed at the MSRP. Whereas in other countries, we're seeing some listings that seem to be significantly above the MSRP. Now, this is all stuff listed ahead of time, so, I mean, we shall see what happens, but it's, I don't know. It might make you a little bit nervous if you're looking on buying one of these, you know, in Europe on November. And is $1,200 reasonable on these things? Well, I guess we'll find out with reviews. But man, that's a lot of money to ask for a 4080. It just feels bad, man. Anyway, so apparently, you know, I had actually missed this, but there had been some outcry over Ryzen 7000 CPUs not performing as well as expected in certain situations. They're good in most situations, but apparently some inconsistencies. And AMD has released an official response to that. Now, again, I'm seeing this reported here at WCCF Tech, but this is the direct quote here from AMD. So AMD says, "We've been made aware of reports of unexpected performance deltas in certain games with AMD Ryzen desktop processors, as well as performance variance between Windows 11 and Windows 10 in certain game titles. They say that we're currently investigating, but based on testing to date, have not observed a material difference in game performance between OS versions across a variety of operating scenarios and game titles." So I'm reading that as they're saying they've looked into this and they aren't able to replicate the problem. That's what that sounds like to me. They go on to say, many factors affect gaming performance, including the game engine, CPU architecture, GPU selection, and memory choices. As new architectures enter the market, we often observe performance anomalies, which must be addressed by the component vendor or the game publisher. And that this is not a new phenomenon, nor is it unexpected. So they're acknowledging that issues like this often can occur with new CPU platforms, that kind of a thing, and that it's a complicated interaction between the hardware and the software and the operating system and all of that. As we have done since the introduction of Ryzen, when these performance anomalies are brought to light, we will use them to steer our partner engagements with game developers and ecosystem hardware partners to implement optimizations and eliminate the variations. Okay, so this seems like its response that basically says, we looked into it and couldn't replicate the problem. Yes, problems like this can happen. And, you know, if we notice them and can figure out what the problem is, they'll try to, you know, have their software partners work with them and fix them. But it sounds to me like there's no real fix on the way for this particular problem, because it sounds to me like they couldn't replicate the problem. Now, this WCCF Tech article is saying that the lack of performance is in certain games such as Doom Eternal, GTA 5, Metro Exodus, and others. And note that this might be a less than satisfactory answer, because again, it looks like they're basically just saying, yeah, it can happen. We didn't really replicate the problem, and these things happen. Anyway, this is kind of exciting on the streaming front. So the new line of GPUs coming out all support AV1. Intel supports AV1 encoding, the new 4000 series from Nvidia supports AV1 encoding, and I believe that the new Radeon GPUs should also be supporting AV1. I can't remember whether that's officially confirmed or just rumored at this point. We'll find out for sure on November 3rd. Anyway, the point is that OBS Studio has been updated to support hardware NVENC AV1 encoding. However, it doesn't look like it's supporting streaming yet, because streaming platforms don't support AV1 yet. Now, that's according to this Video Cards article. I'm not a streamer, so I'm not super up to date on that. I do think this is good, though. AV1 seems like a really good thing, and I'm actually excited because if AMD can get good AV1 support, and then if streaming platforms do start supporting it, one of the reasons why NVIDIA can charge a premium on their GPUs is certain advantages, one of those being their hardware encoder with NVENC being better for streaming. And so AV1 could hopefully lower, more level that playing field. AMD had good H.265 encoding, but H.265 encoding isn't free. There's a small licensing fee, like it's like $1 to make it work on Windows. But the point is, it wasn't supported by streaming platforms and all of that. So I'm excited for both the better quality at low bit rates you could get from AV1, as well as maybe, helping to increase competition in the GPU market by maybe leveling the playing field. Obviously, lots of testing needed to confirm that. And there's, all of the updates for this OBS update. Now, Intel Arc GPUs, which I tested out to some frustration recently. It looks like this was tested by Random Gaming in HD, who tested out some older titles like GTA 4, Elder Souls, I think they mean Elder Scrolls, Oblivion, The Witcher 3, and all of games like that, with an Arc A750 using a Vulkan-based translation layer inside of DirectX environments. And the idea here is basically one of the main issues with Intel's Arc GPUs is that their support for DX12 is pretty good, Vulkan is pretty good, but older, DX9, DX11, DX10, that kind of stuff, just doesn't run as well. Their drivers aren't optimized for that. But this would be a translation layer from those older DirectX versions into Vulkan, which is supported well by Intel. Now, I'm not sure if it's stated clearly in this whether he was testing on Linux or not, but my understanding is that this DXVK translation layer works best in Linux. I'm not 100% sure on the details. Maybe check out this video if you want more. But it looks like he was seeing some improvements in certain games. Like in GTA 4, he noticed that the highest frame rates with the Intel Arc A750 on average were slightly under 60 FPS, but when implementing the files to utilize Vulkan, the frame rate increased to 123 FPS on average, and also saw some gains in other games as well. So I think this would be an interesting test. I've only seen this article about it. I haven't had a chance to watch the full video yet. But this looks like it might be something worth exploring, especially if you have an Intel Arc GPU. But again, I'm curious whether you have to actually be on Linux for that to work. Not that there's anything wrong with Linux, other than a lot of people aren't and don't want to be on Linux. Now, I thought this was interesting in terms of more like mods and type things. So Skyrim, Fallout 4, Resident Evil Village to get unofficial Nvidia DLSS support. So I will really want to see where this goes because, one of the cool things with like FSR 1.0 was that it was easy to mod into games, although the actual image quality that you get isn't much compared to FSR 2.0 or Nvidia's DLSS. But because DLSS and FSR 2.0, those kind of temporal upscalers, need deeper integration within the actual game engine, access to motion vectors and things like that, a lot of people weren't sure that modding that in would ever really be a thing. Like, you can mod FSR 2.0 into a game that supports DLSS because the game already supports DLSS, so you're kind of, just dropping into that already supported system, the way the mod works. You can drop in the DLL files. However, games that don't support DLSS or FSR 2.0, I would be really interested if we actually do get successful mods of these things. Now, it looks like that's what we're seeing reported here. So Skyrim and Fallout 4 VR DLSS support. Master modder Pure Dark has been working on adding DLSS to VR games. And this is specifically talking about VR games like a madman. He just got DLSS working in Skyrim, which will improve both performance, which means room for more graphics and mods, and look much sharper than the blurry TAA. Because again, games without a very good TAA implementation, DLSS, does supplant the TAA implementation and could look better than some. That's the better than native thing with DLSS. Sometimes it looks better than a poorly implemented native TAA implementation. Anyway, I haven't had a chance to test any of this out, but that's really interesting if this ends up actually working out, if people really can mod DLSS into games that don't have any support for it at all. Some quick stuff. So we're seeing enthusiast AORUS Z790 motherboards supporting XMP DDR5 8000 or 8333. There we go. Profiles up to DDR5 9300 OC. Interesting. Those are some big numbers, that's for sure. How much are you paying for that RAM? That's another question. We're seeing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 breaking 260,000 concurrent players on Steam, so that looks like a pretty big launch. We are seeing Nvidia's RTX 4090 running Genshin Impact, which is an incredibly popular game, at 13K resolution. So guys, if 8K isn't enough for you, if you want to play a mobile game, why not play it at 13K on an RTX 4090? Now, this is apparently done by YouTuber Golden Reviewer and has uploaded some evidence of this. I'm just seeing this article about it. Honestly, I'm not too interested in actually doing this, but it just seemed like a funny little headline. So, 4090 can be a 13K GPU if you want to play mobile games. Anyway, we're seeing some interesting evidence that some Ryzen 5 7600X desktop CPUs actually have two CCDs like you would see in the Ryzen 9 series, but one of them's completely disabled, and you wouldn't really have any way of telling whether or not you had one. This was discovered by Derbauer. That is how you pronounce that, right? Anyway, when he delidded his 7600X, he found an extra CCD that just wasn't really doing anything. So it's unclear why it's there. One possibility would be just that this is a defective 7900X or something like that where one CC didn't work, so you might as well sell the thing with one of them enabled, and this shouldn't really affect your performance, as I understand it, or anything like that. Now, in a little bit of jumping over to console news, let me actually start here. So I've seen a lot of people talking about the prices of PC gaming right now, and like how you can't build budget systems to compete with the consoles. And I do just want to make sure everybody understands that's because consoles can either be sold at cost or even for a loss. Phil Spencer was claiming that they could be losing up to $200 on their Series S consoles and up to $100 on their Series X consoles. And the idea is that you then make that money back up through subscription services and software sales. Whereas, PC hardware can't do that. So that can be true that you can get a better, lower end value experience off of consoles if you're willing to go with the console gaming situation. But that's not necessarily saying that the PC parts are ridiculously overpriced, although some of them are. It's also saying that, console manufacturers can manufacture in huge bulk volumes to reduce cost, as well as selling at a loss to make that up in software profit. Anyway, speaking of console sales, PS5 sales have surpassed 25 million globally as Sony shifts another 3.3 million consoles, and they're being stocked up for the holiday season availability. And the Xbox boss, speaking of him, is thinking about new hardware and mobile. He's admitting that their first-party drought on new Xbox first-party games, it has been too long. And when he talks about new hardware, he's also talking a lot about mobile and talking about really liking, free-to-play stuff as a, interesting thing for the future. I don't know. We'll see where they go with that. I'm not sure I like the look into mobile and free-to-play. I mean, it's fine if they want to go there as long as they still, target the core gaming audience as well, in my opinion. And the last thing I want to leave us here with was an interesting thing I saw over here on our hardware, where it's a bunch of numbers, guys. Anyway, posted a image, which I just find interesting, which is the CUDA core percentage of the different NVIDIA GPU lineups. So let me zoom in on this a bit. Just realize that 0% is down here, so as I zoom in, you lose the bottom of the graph for scale. But this shows like your 700 series, your 900 series, your 1000 series, 2000 series, 3000 series, and 4000 series. And they have it as, your top-end chip, which for a lot of these were Titans, but now we've been seeing the 90 class, with their, they're set at the 100% level. So we're not saying these all have the same CUDA core count. We're saying that for that generation, that set is 100%. And then the rest of that generation, you can see the CUDA core count of the other GPUs up against that. So here we saw the Titan and the 780 Ti with the same number of CUDA cores, and the 780 falling at 80% of that CUDA core count. Whereas you saw the, the 980 is down here at like, what is that, 60-something percent. Oh, it's above 65% of the CUDA core count of the Titan. Whereas we saw the 3080 at, over 80% of the CUDA core count of the 3090 Ti. So that's really interesting, right? There wasn't a huge performance delta between the 80 and the 90 class on the 3000 series, whereas the 4000 series, look guys, our 4080 16 gigabyte, the one that we're actually getting, is down here at a little over 50% of the full chip. Now, compared to the 4090, it's a little bit closer, but again, we're expecting a 4090 Ti. There is a full chip. The 4090 isn't the full unlocked die. And then that 4080 12 gigabyte that they were planning on offering but got canceled was only a little over 40% of the CUDA core count. And again, we might see that as still come in as like a 4070 Ti or something. We don't know what exactly will happen. And these are listed as question marks. So these are just based on rumors or guesswork. But the point is, look at that delta compared to the 3000 series. That is huge. And that's what a lot of people were complaining about. And I thought this is an interesting visualization. This is not new information, but I think this is an interesting visualization of where the 80 class usually is. And I think this shows that the 30 class, the 80 class was much closer to the top end than we usually see. And then we're seeing this massive jump, not only back to where we used to be, but below where we used to be with the 4000 series with that CUDA core delta. I hope all of you have an excellent day.